January 15th meeting of the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. We are going to go around the table and we will quickly introduce ourselves. We'll ask everybody who's in the room to quickly introduce themselves and let us know who they're representing today. And then we will turn to you and let you identify yourself for the record. So I'm Kathleen James from Bennington 4 District.
Scott Campbell from Calvary, Essex.
Richard Bailey, Hyde Park, Lamoille 2 District.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Klepner, Chittenden 13.
Lawrence Billy, Wyndham 2.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
All right, folks.
Olivia Goebel, Representative Civilians Intern.
Patty Cronin, also Representative Civilians Intern.
Maggie Mari, I'm an intern for Representative James.
Kendall Turney, intern for Senator White.
Ellen Nesbathy, Danville resident. I just do some writing on health and environment because that's what I care about, just citizen.
Great. Hi, I'm Andrea Shortsleeve. I am the interim commissioner for the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Danielle Fisco, Commissioner, Forest Parks and Recreation.
And I'm Jason Batchelder, DEC Commissioner.
All right, thank you so much. For the record, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. For the record, I'm Julie Moore. I'm the Secretary of Natural Resources. I'm joined by Billy Coster, who's our Director of Planning at the agency, and then Charles Martin, who is the Deputy Secretary. And thought that I could start by just giving a little intro to ANR, touch on a couple of topics that I think will be of specific interest to this committee, and then I know each of the commissioners looks forward to introducing their departments in just a little bit more detail to all of you this morning. So ANR has about 650 full-time employees. During the summer, we do swell our ranks to well over 1,000, largely because we staff up to operate state parks, which Danny can talk about in more detail. Our FY26 budget, we anticipate, will be north of $330 million. This is a really dramatic increase that we've experienced during my tenure as secretary. The first budget I worked on was our FY18 budget, at which point ANR's budget was about $125 million. So nearly a 170% increase in the 8 years I've been in this role. And our budget has just about doubled since FY21. And that is really a reflection of significant, unprecedented amounts of federal funding that we have had access to, including almost $200 million of funding through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, that we were able to deploy, making investments in water infrastructure, both at the municipal scale and helping individual property owners replace failed wells and septic systems. We made investments in reducing combined sewer overflows and addressing stormwater runoff. It has been an amazing opportunity. What followed closely on ARPA's heels has been the bipartisan infrastructure law. Again, ANR has seen almost $450 million through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Again, those dollars are largely focused on water infrastructure investments, but in this instance, replacing lead service lines, addressing emerging contaminants like PFAS that you'll hear a lot about, I'm sure, over the course of the session, as well as just refurbishing aged infrastructure that underpins most of our communities. And we know that these infrastructure investments are really essential to addressing the housing crisis that Vermont is facing. In addition to that, we have seen, and it feels modest, but $20 million should never be talked about as modest, I don't think, more modest amounts of funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. We received a climate pollution reduction grant, as well as some significant funding for conservation that's being, again, administered by our Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. So it's a pretty incredible time to be at ANR. It's a pretty daunting time to be at ANR to try to successfully and efficiently deploy these resources to maximum effect on the ground. And I honestly couldn't be prouder of the team at the agency. Historically, our budget has been about 1/3 federal funds, 1/3 general funds, 1/3 special funds. And our special funds are comprised of things like permit fees, gate receipts for state parks, and hunting and fishing license revenue. That's way out of kilter at this point, because that growth we've experienced over the last 8 years has been disproportionately on the federal side of the account. We also know that those dollars are slated to tail off. I don't think we'll ever return to kind of where we were, anywhere close to where we were in FY18. A lot of our water infrastructure dollars go out as revolving loans, so they will come back to us over time to be reinvested in other projects. So as I say, it's really a busy time at the agency just in that space. But that is not the total of the major initiatives we're involved in. And so just thought I'd touch on a few of the other things we really have in progress right now. Probably most central to this committee is the work around climate action. I know you heard from Jane Lazorchak this morning about the work of the Climate Action Office and supporting the Vermont Climate Council. So that is a significant body of work, but companion to that are some things that we're doing internally, including developing a resilience implementation strategy, which should be delivered at the same time as the revised climate action plan come July 1st, with a heavy focus on resilience and the programs within state government that support that work. Also later today, we'll be submitting a report in conjunction with the Treasurer around the Climate Superfund Act and making recommendations around feasibility and next steps. What I see as going hand in hand with our climate work is the work we're engaged in around environmental justice. That was separate legislation passed by this body 3 years ago that we have really put our shoulder into the implementation of. And I think probably the most public-facing aspect of our work around environmental justice has been a pretty dramatic expansion of public engagement, and both how and where we engage the public in our work. Historically, we do a lot of technical work and sort of put it out as is and ask people if they have any concerns. That's a really challenging approach for the lay public to engage, and so have been very intentional, particularly in our climate work, in trying to attend events being put on by others, share more accessible, plain language information about the work, and understand from Vermonters what conversations they want to have with us about climate. And so would welcome the opportunity to talk to this committee more about that. Also in the throes of year 8 of a 20-year commitment to addressing water pollution in Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog through the Clean Water Fund. That's another significant report we have due to this body today, our annual Clean Water Performance Report that will document or shows where and how we've invested almost $600 million over the last 8 years to address water quality concerns throughout Vermont. We are continuing the work necessary to support implementation of the Flood Resilience Act that was passed by this body last year that directs efforts related to improving dam safety, regulating development within river corridors at the state level, and increasing protections for wetlands. We continue work around emerging contaminants. PFAS and PCBs are the two at the top of my list, but certainly those aren't the only ones that we are monitoring for. And then a lot of work around Act 59, which also I believe has a strong connection to climate. Act 59 is sometimes referred to as the 30 by 30 conservation bill. We submitted a plan earlier this year in collaboration with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board that lays out an inventory of lands that have been conserved in Vermont. We've found about 26% of the Vermont landscape has permanent protection at this point. And so the next phase is to move into the planning for how to achieve permanent conservation of 30% and using a wider array of conservation tools to achieve protections for up to 50% of the Vermont landscape by 2050. And between those of us in the room, we have the ability to speak in more detail about any of those topics, should they be of interest to the committee. The only thing I would add in closing, knowing that you also have an IT component to your work here, is one of the things we've started to look into it at A&R is an asset management system. Collectively across the agency, between state parks, fishing access areas and hatcheries, major dams, among other pieces of infrastructure, we own upwards of $2 billion worth of infrastructure. And a lot of that is being tracked in individual programs by individual program managers. And we know that we really need to bring that information together into a comprehensive asset management system. We've been doing a lot of learning with our colleagues at the Agency of Transportation, who have an excellent asset management system, about whether there are opportunities to kind of tag on to what they've already built. But just put that out there in the other half of your work to know that that is one of the major IT projects, I think, facing my agency.
Thanks. Let's put that on the list for future testimony. Representative Moore?
Can I just ask, is there money in your upcoming budget for that?
We have made a proposal for that. I will have to wait for the governor's budget to drop, but we've been working on the scoping regardless, which includes some of the work we need to do internally, identifying all of our own existing data sets, and making sure that we know what information we have and what information we'll have to collect in order to populate such a system. Okay, great. Thank you.
I don't know, Billy, if there's anything you'd like to add, or maybe just a little bit about your role.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Billy Coster. I'm the Director of Planning and Policy for the agency, and my team and I are primarily responsible for the agency's work in reuse, energy, and climate. And we do that through supporting our regulatory programs, specifically the agency's participation in Act 250 for commercial and residential development, and I'm sure of interest to this committee, our participation in the Public Utility Commission's Section 248 process, the regulation of energy generation and transmission facilities, and increasingly telecom. So the agency is a statutory party in both Act 250 and Section 248, and we provide evidence and recommendations to those tribunals about whether projects comply with their environmental criteria. We also spend a significant amount of time working with the regulated community, utilities, energy developers, and concerned citizens and communities, educating them on those regulations, helping them assess the environmental constraints of certain sites where they're interested in building projects, and ideally trying to make them be successful in configuring projects that can move ahead to achieve their goals and comply with the environmental laws of the state. We're also, in supporting that work, do a lot within the agency around the development of policies and guidelines that help direct how we conduct that review and provide kind of guidance to the regulated community and others. We also are very involved in the legislative process around those topics as well. And yes, please.
Sorry. I'm a real 101 person. We have not yet been able to have the PUC come. Could you just, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, just 2 sentences on the 248 process?
Sure.
Okay. Just to make sure we're all trying to move along together.
The PUC operates as a quasi-judicial tribunal. They basically act like a small court, and they hold, in most cases, contested cases where a developer, an applicant, a petitioner comes forward and proposes a project, and then other parties participate and provide comments to the PUC as to whether they think that project meets the commission's criteria. And then ultimately the PUC decides what facts are right, they interpret the law, and they issue certificates of public good, which is their umbrella permit for energy transmission and generation projects. And those permits typically have a series of conditions that require the project be built and operated in a certain way to comply with their criteria. Those are for the larger projects. Smaller, like net metered solar projects, things under a certain scale of generation go through more of a written exercise where people are providing written comments to the PUC to identify whether they believe projects are compliant or whether they need to be changed to meet their criteria, and they issue permits based on those comments. So it's basically like a small court that they don't necessarily have a lot of their own expertise. While their staff is very experienced, they're really relying on the parties to come before them and make arguments and provide information and recommendations to them on how they should act.
Thank you. And we will be getting the PUC in for 101, but okay.
Yeah. Just a few other things. Our office also just generally plays a facilitation role across our departments, or especially around large complex development projects. So even if it's not going through Act 250 or 248, we help people navigate the process. We help reconcile competing interests within our agency. Sometimes our departments may want to have slightly different outcomes in a given situation. So we try to make sure that we can align that and be consistent so that when people come to engage our agency in work, they have a sense of kind of what the answer is going to be each time consistently. So we're just a good resource if you ever have questions around our regulatory work.
I have a question.
Yeah, Rep.
I'm just wondering about recommendations you might have for streamlining the process or making it easier for developers, especially housing, for example.
Sure.
And not that you would have them right now, but something that you could provide.
Absolutely.
Something that you've been working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been very involved in the various kind of Act 250 reform and housing initiatives over the past few years. There's a significant amount of rulemaking that's going to follow out of those bills that we'll be deeply involved with. But yeah, happy to speak to any of those in kind of broader, specific detail.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, well, one flag that may be of interest to this committee is sort of the standard is different that Act 250 projects are judged against as opposed to 248. Billy spoke to this certificate of public good, and so it's weighing, recognizing their impacts and benefits and making a judgment on the relative weight. Act 250 is held to a no undue adverse impact standard, and so it is effectively a significantly higher bar because it doesn't weigh any of the offsetting benefits of some of the projects. But that may be an area of interest to dig into.
Sure. We're all looking for ways to, especially unleash development of housing because we need housing. That's absolutely
Understood.
Yeah, just at a high level, our agency has been consistently advocating for a model where we really try to focus growth in areas that have good infrastructure, that have limited natural resources, where we have population centers and really unlock the potential there and be more protective in areas outside of those centers.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Sounds like something we might have passed last year. Sounds familiar. So, Representative.
I was just chuckling.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Representative Morrow.
So it seems like it's state intent to build out distributed solar energy, have people put it on their house in order to build a more robust distributed electric system and to help Vermonters. And then we have this timetable to go all electric over the next 10 years. So that's obviously in line with that. But then you have, is that accurate? Like it's kind of state policy to promote solar in this, or?
I think certainly with the update to the renewable energy standard, there's clear goals and objectives for significant amount of in-state deployment of distributed renewable generation. I think there's questions about at what scale we're going to see that. Is it going to be a lot of rooftop? Is it going to be larger utility scale systems? So I think there's still some uncertainty about that. But yeah, absolutely. With the updated res, there's a clear mandate for more in-state generation.
Right, and so then you have the PUC like lowering the net metering rates available to Vermonters, which seems to work in direct contradiction to that goal. Do you have any comments on that?
Sure, and I would first encourage you to hear from the Public Service Department, who's really the ratepayer advocate for the state and most versed in that. I think that the logic there is that net metering is providing a subsidy for power. It's paying those folks who are net metering more than the market rate for that energy. And that program was very intentional early, about 10 or 15 years ago, as a way to jumpstart the renewable energy industry in Vermont. It was paying people to invest in these systems that were costly and subsidizing that so that we could build an industry. Now we have a very robust industry. The cost differential between those renewable systems and other forms of power has shrunk dramatically. So there's not the necessity to subsidize them. And in fact, it's where I think the state is going is asking the utilities to provide 100% renewable power. So instead of paying an above market rate for an individual to do that, they're asking utilities to drive that cost down by providing it at a utility scale. So we don't, in theory, need to pay people more to put solar on their property if within the next 6 years, the 100% of the state's going to be served by renewable resources at a significantly lower rate. So that is the push and pull, but yeah, I'd encourage you to hear from the department on that.
And we will, I think we'll have, as we move forward through our shared knowledge building, we will definitely have time to be talking about net metering and solar with the relevant agencies.
Thank you.
Just before I turn it over to the commissioners, I wanted to give Charles Martin, our Deputy Secretary, a chance to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. So some of you have probably worked with me in the past. I know Representative Sibilia has, and others on the committee. I think it's probably worth kind of laying out how my role differentiates from the commissioners. Whenever possible, I'll have departments kind of lead on issues that impact departments directly, and for those issues that kind of move across the agency, I'll probably play a larger role in those. That said, you'll see me joining commissioners when they come in to testify on this committee, and probably joining Billy and his team quite often as well. I am 4 months into the department, but I have a background with state government and federal government, so hopefully that adds some value to everyone, and that's kind of my bit, and I'll leave it there if anyone has any questions.
Good morning. So Director Lazarchuk was in talking just about the climate office this morning, and one of the questions that I was talking with her about, and feels like a kind of evolution in our policy at the state level around climate change, is who's thinking about the changing economy because of climate change and what is happening globally and with other large states, which is changing our economy. And, I asked who was kind of the point person for that, which she said was you. But are you working with Commerce on that? Is there any material to talk about that? Are there any initiatives that you all are thinking about, making sure that, our smallest businesses and our smallest communities are, being able to stay connected to that changing economy?
Yeah. So I don't know if Jane was able to speak with you all about the measuring and assessing progress tool that her team is in the process of standing up. We're sort of in the early stages of that, but that will be part and parcel of responding exactly to what you're saying. In the interim, we have been trying to collect information on sort of the magnitude of the investments that are being made in different components of our climate work, weatherization, for example, to know how much money we're spending, how many units are being weatherized. We're able to track that information over time. It doesn't provide the sort of comprehensive macroeconomic analysis that you're looking at. It's very much sort of practice by practice at this point, but we are absolutely building in that direction. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. Using clean water as a sort of a comparison, and we're about to deliver that clean water report today. I would say this year it's sort of where I had hoped we would get to, but that represents 8 or 9 years of kind of building the tracking, the systems needed to be able to report out that kind of information, where it's not just outputs, which I think we're getting better at in the climate space, but some of the outcomes, which I think is what you're alluding to. So very much a work in progress, but share that interest in being able to speak to those things.
May I just follow? So just in the interest of clarity, because this is, I think, a new place that I'm really concerned about. For instance, is there anyone that is thinking about where we have gas stations and where they're closing? Is anyone thinking about the number of heating fuel companies? Because I know that we're seeing, consolidation in that sector, and so reduced competition in that sector. Other changes to the economy that are happening, and how that is impacting different parts of Vermont, right? So potentially, as you know, I live in rural Vermont, so I worry about rural Vermont, are we seeing reduced access to, gas stations for cars because, there's less of a market for gas stations for cars and, because more people are driving EVs. Who's tracking that type of economic transition and whether or not, it's accessible to Vermonters in the administration?
Yeah, so we have very relevant data sets that weren't put in place for those purposes. So for example, in terms of gas stations, through our waste management division, we permit every underground storage tank in the state and have an inspection, a regulatory program that requires periodic inspections and updates from those owners. So we can generate that kind of map you're talking about, but it wasn't collected in a thinking about an energy transition perspective. I think similarly, fuel delivery companies have tax reporting obligations to the tax department. We've worked over time to refine those forms, so we're getting better information about the quantity and type of fuel being delivered. This will be the first full year of that information, 2024. But again, we've asked for that data to be collected for different reasons. And I think thinking about how we can use that to look at the overall energy transition is really an important idea, and one I would say we haven't really wrestled with yet.
Yeah, okay, great. And do you think that would be just ANR, or do you think that would, to me, it feels like this would be commerce because you're looking at sectors in the economy that are changing.
Yeah, and I think it probably would need to be a shared effort. I think we have that kind of granular information. I do think, honestly, the tax department would also be an important partner in this. As we looked at the clean heat standard and trying to have folks register with the PUC in early days there, a lot of the initial information about who should be registering actually came from the tax department as well, because there are reporting obligations in these otherwise somewhat unregulated industries.
Okay, and great. So, Madam Chair, this is an issue that is of really great importance to me because I can see what is happening on the ground as these things are happening. So, I just want to flag that, just want to flag it. It's an issue.
Flagged. Done, flagged.
If I can follow up. A very important issue to me as well, and I completely agree with Rep. Sevilla. We really need to be looking ahead at what the economic impacts of the climate disruption are going to have. And obviously, the environmental impacts and resilience and mitigation are all important, but the economic impacts are really what people feel, and how is that going to play out long term. So one of the other issues that I mentioned to Director Lazorchak was a question about, in the same vein, looking at models or studies about the effect of the decreasing reliance on fossil fuels and what impact that has on the global market and on accelerating the already existing price volatility of fossil fuels, shortening the frequencies and increasing the amplitudes of those spikes and dives. So anyway, that sort of thing. Obviously, predicting that is, if we knew that, we could predict the stock market and all be rich. But there are people who study that, and it would be good for us to understand what the impacts are going to be on our constituents as well, especially in rural areas where people have right now little alternative to gassing up their cars and driving long distances. So anyway, so maybe a commerce question, but as ANR has a climate action office and is sort of leading that coordination, it seems like something that really we wanted to be on the radar.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Onward.
Yeah, Billy and I can step aside and let the commissioners scoot in and introduce themselves in a little more detail of the work of their department.
Great. Are folks at the table ready for the scooting?
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
it all right if I just stand? Is that?
Yeah, I'm,
Okay.
sorry, we do not have a whole lot
Sometimes
of
people sit in
space.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
prefer to stand. I just didn't want to
Super.
leave people feeling like I was lurking.
Do you need to get back?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Well, good morning. My name is Andrea Shortsleeve, and I am the interim commissioner for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I've been working with the department for 8 years as a wildlife biologist and in the commissioner role for about a month now. Our department has about 130 full-time employees. Approximately 40 of those are in the warden service. And the mission of our department is the conservation of fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitat for the people of Vermont. So it's a really big mission, and I'm really proud of all the conservation work that we're able to do. I know that hunting and trapping gets a lot of airtime, both here in the State House and in the media, but that is just a small fraction of the conservation work that we do. We are a regional leader in land and habitat conservation. We have a dynamic, fantastic friend and endangered species program, and we provide public access to people across the state. You'll hear Commissioner Fitzko talk about outdoor recreation, and I just want to plug Fish and Wildlife's participation in that sector. We provide a lot of opportunities for people to get out in the woods and bring tourists into the state, often in those shoulder seasons that aren't quite as popular during typical tourist times. We also run 2 summer-long educational conservation camps that are quite popular and very affordable for Vermonters. And we offer educational programs and workshops to communities throughout the state. I want one more project I'd like to highlight is the Vermont Conservation Design, which is a project that our science has developed, or excuse me, our department has led the way in this designing the science, and it's a guiding document that really applies to a lot of the work that you all have dealt with and will be dealing with, including climate, housing designation, and a lot of the Act 250 work that you will be doing. And then finally, germane to this committee here, I just want to highlight that in the future, we do see that we will be needing a new data system for our license sales and our point of sale system. We see that coming up in the next 3 years, and that's going to be a significant change for our department, and we need some infrastructure for that as well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. And I do want to flag that we have our staff is very enthusiastic and very dedicated. I'd be happy to come and talk to any of you at any point. I'd be happy to have them come in.
Questions about the testimony? Okay.
Fantastic.
I do have a, sorry.
Sure. Representative,
Yes.
Representative Kleppner.
Sorry, you're almost off the hook. Can you tell us about the relationship between your department and the Fish and Wildlife Board?
Sure. So the Fish and Wildlife Board is selected by the governor. There's 14 members on that committee, and they are responsible for setting the rules that are related to hunting, trapping, and fishing in the state. We actually have a board meeting tonight, if you would like to join. And our department's relationship is we serve as somewhat of an advisory role. We help provide information and scientific background to petitions and rules that the board may be considering. So that's really our relationship.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll ask, I can't let you off the hook either. I'll ask about the data management system development and sort of where you're at with that. Should we have somebody in to talk about that at some point?
I think that would be fantastic if we could have someone come and, a subject matter expert really to testify on that. We foresee probably needing a new one in the next 3 years.
Right.
It's just the infrastructure that we have now is out of date, and it's really lagging behind the national standard. And what it is actually causing an impact that is causing, it's limiting the type of licenses that we can offer, which I think is limiting some revenue for our department.
Okay, so you started thinking about it, but you really haven't gotten very far. Is kind of where I'm understanding.
Yes, we just don't have the funding to really pursue it right now.
Yeah,
So.
You haven't even started scoping it.
No. We see it in the future, and we would like to address it as soon as we can, but we don't have it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Just a comment about that. I'm glad you brought it up. Thanks for recognizing the equally important other half of our committee jurisdiction, which we will not be overlooking. Let's get you back soonish, if we can, maybe to talk about that.
Great.
And Representative Sebelius, I see your.
Is Fish and Wildlife the purview of this community committee? No, it's the Environment Committee, right?
No, but state IT systems are
Yes,
the
yes,
purview
yes,
of this
yes,
committee.
yes.
So I think we're on track here. But Fish and
Pardon me.
Wildlife, no. Act 250, no.
Right, but the 248 is also.
I know. 248, yes. 248, yes. 250, no. Representative Morrow?
You're probably already on top of this, but it would be great to have a little testimony or at least a discussion with a knowledgeable person about the IT system of state government. Like, are they all siloed? Like, they have their little systems and none of them talk to each other, or is there a systematic way we're looking at IT across departments and agencies so that they can be more easily supported and talk to each other, et cetera, et cetera?
These are excellent questions that we will put in the proverbial parking lot, because my hope is that starting next week, we are going to be taking extensive testimony so that we can all learn about our state IT systems.
Thank you.
So that is a really important question. So when I say parking lot, I mean
engines running.
This that parking lot right there that we can all see. So please don't forget that, because we need to start planning our testimony for next week. But pursuant to you and your role in your job, do folks have questions about that? Do we have other folks?
I hope the other two commissioners could introduce themselves.
That would be
as well.
great.
Great, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Allow us to scoot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, all. We're on the court, might run out of energy up here.
Ironically, in the energy committee.
Right.
I've got one right behind me, but.
We've got some duct
Thank you
tape.
so much. Wonderful. Hallelujah.
Help with that.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jason Batchelder. I'm the DEC commissioner. I've been in the role about 15 months. Thank you so much for having me here today. I was with the agency for about 20 years until 2022, when I retired as the director of the Warden Service, and had a blissful retired year with my family, and came back to service when Julie called, and very excited to be in this new role. I still consider it very new, and when we get to the question portion, I will probably write things down and get back to you if I can't answer them myself, or maybe Julie could help. But similarly, our mission, and if we're hurting for time, I have a sort of an expedited version, I have a long version, but I'll do a middle. How about I'll do a middle version?
Middle.
Okay. So our mission is to preserve, enhance, and restore and maintain for this generation and the future, the natural resources of Vermont, protecting human health and the environment. Right? That's not verbatim, but that's the gist. And so it's a huge charge. We have 354-ish employees as of today. We have lots of comings and goings, as you can imagine, in a big operation. And we do have summer fluxes as well, like you'll hear from Commissioner Fisco and Forests and Parks. I just want to go down our list of departments, our divisions, so you'll be familiar with them if you need them, and the directors that are associated and their charge. And the one that I led with yesterday was our AID division. So it stands for Administration and Innovation Division. Certainly, Director Kim McKee is in charge there. Someone that you might want to speak to. She handles some of the IT issues and exploits within our department, and her other charge is essentially to be the administrative adhesive for all 354 of us. So systems and records management, hiring, paperwork. It's a massive charge for her in an organization like ours, with all the moving parts. And I think it's an unfortunate byproduct of state state service, like we have this enormous administrative burden that goes along with all the wonderful work that we do, and she doesn't see it as unfortunate at all. She loves it. And so thankful to have her. Next is our Air Quality and Climate Division, run by Heidi Hales, PhD, if that matters. Most of the people in my shop are scientists, and a lot of them are PhDs, which is why I'd love to get them in front of you if you see fit. They're just so capable. Heidi's division is essentially is what it sounds like. It's air quality and climate. They deal with pollution sources. They deal with noxious fumes. You've heard of News VT, the big landfill, right, where all our trash goes, and they monitor the fumes that come out of there for all types of contaminants, and many other things. They have I talked about this yesterday. They have a source monitoring system in Chittenden County to monitor air quality. We have wonderful air quality in the state, and when we don't, she's on top of it. Nothing a whole lot we can do when there are Canadian wildfires, but most of the time we're extraordinarily at the top of the list with air quality here in Vermont. Next is drinking water and groundwater protection, which is run by Brian Redmond. Big job. He manages public drinking water systems and all the contaminants that we worry about within those drinking water systems, lead and PFAS and other emerging contaminants. Likely you've heard of these, and if you have not, happy to give you a 101. He also manages discharges to groundwater, all connected. When something goes down your drain, it goes into a septic system, likely in Vermont, unless you're on town water. And then it leaves there and migrates to our groundwater into our aquifers and comes back up eventually as an emerging, or as hopefully as clean water, but if it's not, that's where Brian's shop comes in. And surface water also affected by that. So big job. Likely if you've been in state government at all or town government and you have a public drinking water supply, his shop has affected you in some way. Has a lot to do with daycares, has a lot to do with like big municipal buildings like a police station, that they have to tell everyone what's in their water, and that goes through Brian's shop. Next is our enforcement and our environmental compliance division, which consists of an environmental assistance office and an enforcement office. So our environmental enforcement officers who are regulating all of our laws. They're essentially civilian inspector investigator types who then find violations and return them to our attorneys, and then for enforcement that goes on to the Attorney General's office. And then we have an assistance office there as well that helps. I'll just say the average Vermonter, of which I am one, navigate the complex system of environmental laws that we have. So I feel a very responsible way of handling our laws. We'd rather have compliance than penalties. And so we spend a great deal of time helping people through those laws. There are many. The state geologist lives in our office. He's also a PhD scientist and has been in his glory during the floods, helping people find out why their land is shifting and why or why not their house might end up in a river. Normally, his task is mapping and research on state bedrock and land and I'm not going to get scientific on here. I have no capability to do that. He does a lot of mapping and a lot of research, and lately he's been assisting in Vermont emergency management with letting folks know if their house is going to be salvageable or not. Very, very tall task, and has a very small shop with which to do it, but does an outstanding job. And that's Ben DeYoung is his name. Extraordinary guy, if you ever would care to meet him. And then Matt Chapman runs our waste management and prevention division. Brownfields and more emerging contaminants like PCBs in schools, which most of you may have heard of, a contentious but necessary effort that falls to Matt's folks, getting those carcinogens out of our our schools is a huge task and something that we take very seriously. He has taken very seriously, and certainly could talk about that also if you wish. And Matt also has close ties with anything waste that you might imagine a waste manager does, right? Also News VT. Once a year, they actually go there and pull up our trash bags and see what we're all throwing away and make sure we're doing it the way that is recommended, which is fascinating to me. The Watershed Management Division is next, and that's run by Pete LaFlamme. Our biggest division and a very capable director, and Pete has been a 37-year employee of the state and a director for, I think, pushing 18 years. Very, very capable shop. Largely deals with wetlands. And so if you had a wetlands issue or concern or a permit denied or a permit that you couldn't believe wasn't denied, it was Pete's shop. Pete does an extraordinary job of protecting our wetlands, which you all understand are a finite resource and something that are worth protecting. He does a wonderful job. That we have 800 lakes and ponds, 23,000 miles of rivers and streams, and 300,000 acres of wetlands. And people want to build, undoubtedly there's a wetland nearby or where they want to build, and Pete's shop helps people navigate that that complicated system. That leads me to our water investment division, which is run by Neil Kim. He's wearing two hats now. He's my most recent hire for my new deputy commissioner role. You might even be listening. Hi, Neil. Thank you for everything that you do. So they essentially they're essentially a big bank. They pass through money for our department for municipalities and other entities in need of water infrastructure. So a city or a town needs a new waste treatment system, very expensive. Neil's shop will help purchase that, fund it, loan the money, help you manage it. Manages federal clean water and drinking water state revolving loan funds, and spends a tremendous amount of money. Most of it I sign off on and try to understand, but very capable individual in Neil, and hopefully you get to meet him. I think you will. But that's the long and the short condensed there for you within my department. And there's certainly many other programs that I didn't touch on within these departments. Dam safety is one within the water investment division that could spend all day on, not me, but someone could spend all day on. That comes to mind when we deal with floods and in other aspects. So happy to take questions if I can, and certainly will get back to you if I can't answer them.
Thank you. So amazing staff that you have in that division, and a lot of my folks end up engaging with them. The quantity of them has often been challenging in terms of timing, not the quality of them.
Yes.
Can you, and I know this is not a topic, Madam Chair, that we'll be doing a lot with water
Right.
here in this committee, but just in the past, I've asked about vacancies. What are you looking at right now in terms of authorized positions and vacancies in your division?
I didn't check today, and it does fluctuate day by day. At last look, which was about a month ago, admittedly, it was 11%. We go between 6 and 16, but 11% was the last time I looked. I've been assured by Kim McKee, the first director I introduced, that's normalish for a big entity like this. It does seem alarming when you look at it, but I seem to, and not to sound anything like I'm not. I sign a lot of resignations and I sign an equally amount of hiring paperwork, right? It seems like daily I'm hiring someone, seems like daily someone is leaving, whether it be retirement, moving divisions, moving departments, moving agencies. It's a big entity. And what I thought you were going to say is why don't you have enough staff? And that's a fair question. We have many charges, and when sometimes a charge will be put over here and only in the rearview mirror do we see where we left something behind, right? And these are just unintended consequences of wonderful efforts that, that committees and constituents put upon us that we try to keep up with, but, the balance is a huge challenge for us. But I think it's 11%.
So as you're thinking about, I know it's a very high priority for all of us, including the administration, more housing, and of course, permitting of this, and the delays that happen because of quantity are pretty significant and really impact our ability to build housing. Are there any proposals that you all think you'll be making in terms of how to mitigate the delays that happen just as a matter of quantity, not quality? I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah,
Sure.
I might be able to take that
Please.
if you want, Jason, which is just to say, there will be an omnibus housing proposal put forward by the administration soon, and there are some A&R components of that. Thinking about drinking water and wastewater in particular, knowing that core infrastructure is essential and how we can streamline some of the permitting in that space.
Thanks. Again, I know that isn't our purview, but appreciate
Thank you for clarifying.
Appreciate it.
We wander into other committees. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask a question about is that vacancies or is it turnover? And if it's vacancies, then what's the turnover rate?
Sure. I don't know the turnover rate. I can certainly find that out for you, and I'm happy to do it.
And then the second question is, when you said dam safety, what engagement are you with the hydroelectric generation, and is that a separate, in the dam safety from water control or?
Sure. The way I'll answer that, and the Secretary's more than welcome to chime in, we do own dams that produce energy, and so our dam safety program is hand in hand with, say, Green Mountain Power. Anything that they do or we do goes through a team that is formed with both of those staff, other staff that are involved, and we don't do one thing without the other. Waterbury is the big one that comes to mind. We certainly are responsible for dams, that own dams that do produce energy.
I could maybe just add on a little bit to that, which is one of the complicated regulatory processes that Billy helps steward us through is FERC, that is responsible for licensing many of the hydroelectric facilities in the state. There's a whole class of hydroelectric facilities that are going through re-permitting right now. Those permits have very long lifespans. Most of the permits issued by Jason's team, I think, are 5-year permits. FERC permits tend to be 40 to 50 years. So you can imagine kind of the enormous change in environmental expectations that has occurred over those last 40 to 50 years. But Billy coordinates between Jason's shop, where there are dam safety experts, also experts in stream flow and what's needed to protect the quality of our streams, as well as folks within Andrea's team that are focused on some of the habitat impacts. So we have a real active role in that space. And I think there are challenges or tensions between renewable energy and some of the renewable energy as hydropower and some of the environmental protections, and we're always striving to find that balance. That many of our current hydroelectric facilities were built before modern environmental standards, and so need to make some improvements in order to be able to, I think, find the sweet spot in balancing both of those objectives.
One of the things that we'll be planning to learn about is basically how we generate our power in Vermont and how we transmit it. So that's another big parking lot that we're going to need to drive into.
Well, just thank you for this. This has been great to get reacquainted with A&R and all the wonderful things you do. On dams, I recall, I think it was in the Flood Safety Act last year that we added money for additional personnel. Have they been hired?
Yes, not all of them have been hired yet, but we have put a goal of 2027 for all of their hires. Is that correct, Secretary Moore?
Yeah, we didn't receive full funding for all of the positions that were provided in that act, so that's something we'll be taking up. We have enough money to hire 11 of the 15 positions that were provided. I think 3 of them were in the dam safety program and are all either under recruitment or have recently been filled at this point.
That's good. I see you.
Okay.
Go. That's it.
I see you. That's all I need to know.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So one of my concerns, I'm in St. Johnsbury, is around the things that you have talked about is the landfill in Coventry. And I know that Representative Labor is vice chair on the Environment Committee, so you'll be hearing from him too. But I guess one of my thoughts about it, and again, this is not in our purview in this committee, but since you're here, I just want to bring it up. I'm concerned about the lifespan of that facility, 20 years or something like that. How long is it going to take to find and permit and build the next landfill? 20 years? Shouldn't we start on that now? Are we starting on that now? Is a question I have, not something you have to answer right this second. Sure. Just a concern of mine and my part of the state.
I'm just gonna type that one down, and I'm gonna type yours down too. I just realized I forgot my pen, so I'll make sure I don't forget these. I have my notebook over there too.
I'd like to tag on to Representative Campbell too.
Certainly.
Is that landfill in Coventry, what percentage of goes in is actually generated in Vermont, and how much is generated outside of Vermont? And is there any thinking of limiting what comes in from out of state?
I can answer that. We'll have to get you the percentages.
Yeah, I
There's
don't
some
need to know that. I just want that to be a thought.
There are issues around interstate commerce and limitations on what we can do. We have put in place a set of obligations for entities bringing out of state trash to meet the standards we hold ourselves to in terms of segregating household hazardous waste and other potentially damaging products. And as a result, there's a limited amount of municipal solid waste that comes from outside Vermont that is, or household solid waste that is actually disposed of at that facility. I think it's a little different when it comes to construction and demolition debris because that's already often being segregated in other places. But there's, by the high standards Vermont holds its communities to, helps ensure that either waste meets those standards or isn't being brought to our facility. Okay, and yeah, we can certainly get additional information.
Sure.
We have,
right, one more commissioner.
No, I meant, yeah, I think this is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. And again, thank you and congrats on your elections. I know your constituents are expecting a lot as they are with us. So I wish you the best of luck, and I truly mean it. It's a big deal.
Thank you.
Good morning. Danielle Fitzko. I'm the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation. I do talk fast, but I don't know if I talk 2 minutes fast, so I'm happy to come back at another time. I know we were scheduled for just an hour, so I'll leave it up to the committee to determine how you want to proceed.
We're fine.
Okay, I'll try and be quick. So again, Danielle Fitzko, just quick background. I've been with the department for over 20 years, most of my time there with the Urban and Community Forestry Program. So thinking about trees in our downtowns, really maximizing the power that they provide to communities. Then I was Director of Forest for a few years, and then I've been Commissioner for the past 2 years. When we look at SPR, I think our name really tells you what we're about. We are forests. We like to think about our forests as being healthy, intact, sustainably managed, and resilient. This is probably an area your committee may want to hear some more about when you're thinking about energy and wood energy. Our team really does a lot to look at the health of our forests, and we work with all landowners in management of forests. We are, as a state, 76% forested, which is great. We are forest strong. And when we look at the landscape, I would say about 70% is under a forest management plan. Most of them we have oversight of, so recognizing that we are putting in standards that landowners and foresters and loggers are adhering to make sure that we have healthy, thriving, resilient forests for the future. Another sort of fact about our forests for your benefit is the Forest Service does sort of analysis of the state of our forests every year. And sort of we look at the growth of our forests, sort of that biomass in our forests, we are a number called 3 to 1. If we were 1 to 1, meaning that we are growing the same amount as we are removing or we're losing for mortality, In Vermont, we are 3 to 1. So we are growing a lot more biomass in our forest than we are removing or dying from mortality. So that's a really good place to be, and a lot of potential for us to sustainably manage our forests more into the future. We have a whole bunch of programs in our forestry division. We have 60-some staff in there, wonderful experts from a climate forester to watershed forester to private land foresters. Be happy to bring any of those in to talk to you. We also have Vermont State Parks, welcoming this past year over 1 million visitors through our 55 developed state parks all across the state in very rural areas of our state, bringing in over $100 million in economic activity. They are conserved land. They are a great place for Vermonters and visitors alike to kind of come and reconnect with the natural areas. And, you know, sometimes we'd say, like, if they come to work for us, they try Vermont and they stay, because during the summer, we bring on 450 seasonal staff to run our state parks. It's quite a lift to run a business enterprise within state government. We kind of open up a business and close it up every year. When we look at the infrastructure of Vermont State Parks, we are the second biggest infrastructure assets holder in state government after like BGS and AOT. There's $280 million of infrastructure assets, and think about all the toilet buildings and the lean-tos and all the underground pipes. And so there's quite a big of an infrastructure facilities that we have to manage. And then our last division is the Lands Administration and Recreation. And they oversee sort of our lands administration for all of A&R lands, that public lands. So it's fish and wildlife management areas, state forests, state parks, fishing access areas, over 380,000 acres of public lands that are just treasure for Vermont. And so this division helps to oversee sort of all those land records and the long-range management planning for the state. They also are a conservation arm. We have a lot of conservation that we do for the state, whether it's going to be public lands into the future, or we have an easement that's held privately and that we sort of oversee. And the last piece is recreation, which is huge in Vermont. It is actually $4.2 billion in economic activity in the state. We are number 2 in GDP, just behind Hawaii. We do a lot on giving grants out to communities. And through the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, or you hear it called VOREC, we provide a lot of grants out. And I think now we're, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years into VOREC, we're really starting to see that return and the impact it's having in our communities. So that is FPR, 135 staff year round. And like I said, we blow up to 450 in the summer. That is maybe 5 minutes.
That was impressive. Questions?
In light of the California fires, we've got a lot of people thinking about our fire risk. Fortunately, we tend to have some wet times of year, but if we had 2 or 3 years of drought, it could change. What kind of risk assessments do you guys do? And
yeah, I'm happy to. We have a wildland fire team. It's small but mighty. There are 3 full-time staff in a wildland fire team. We have actually increased that. It used to be 2 part-time staff, but just in the past couple of years, we've increased. This year was pretty. We were vulnerable. It was intense. This fall, we may have been wet in the northern part of the state, but we had a drought in the southern part of the state. There were 9 fires that we actually helped municipalities respond to. We are part of what we call a compact. So within the New England states and Quebec, we share resources. So we did bring some resources in from New Hampshire to help us suppress those fires. We monitor fire danger daily during the active season. So from like April all the way through November, and we push out alerts to local fire departments, fire wardens, and then that helps them make decisions on whether or not to issue open burning permits. And if you'll remember, this past fall, we actually put a statewide ban on open burning permits to reduce that risk. 85 fires this year, 1 of them was natural. So there really are human caused here. Now, we don't burn like out west. Our forests are different, but we are vulnerable, and we are doing a lot to increase our capacity to prevent and respond and then suppress when it does happen. So it's an area of planning and growth for us that we've been doing for the past couple of years, and we are continuing to really beef this up. We now, for the first time, have really 3 highly professional wildland fire staff. And we have staff that go out west to fight fires, so we can bring that expertise back to Vermont to be able to respond. But local fire departments, we train them. We work with the Vermont Fire Academy. Happy to share more about that. We have 2 presentations on Friday because it is on everybody's mind, the devastation that's going on in California. Did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank the commissioner. She's run some great tours of our public lands, and if any members ever have the opportunity, they're awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
How does the National Forest inventory compare to what you spoke of? Were they included in your acreage?
Yeah, the national forest in that 70% that I mentioned under forest management plan, that would be included as public lands that are under a management plan. We don't oversee that, but as you know, I've heard they have a very robust planning process through assessments, and then public process for their management.
Secretary Moore, did you all have written testimony or PowerPoint or anything that we could stick up on our website?
We did not.
Is there anything that you could jury rig for us? Or great, because you were in environment today, right?
We were in environment yesterday, but it was in Senate, we were in Senate Natural. Oh, that was yesterday.
We have a PowerPoint from Senate, we can certainly share.
Yes, correct.
Why not?
All right.
I'm all about building the website out.
Sure.
So I think, thank you so much for coming and for taking the time. And I know that we'll be back in touch as we start to learn a little bit more about the very specific area where your work intersects with our committee jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. I think that we can adjourn.
Thank you for having us today.